Hello everyone, welcome to our Excel Basics video number 3. On our second video, we learned about formula inputs, Excel model, and the golden rule. In this video, we will learn about number formatting. Number formatting is a facade. We'll also learn about round function and the dynamics pill formula. If you're following along, please download the Excel workbook file included below the link for this video. To begin with, let us look at the number formatting and the different types of formatting. We will start with the number formatting worksheet, NF1 on this workbook. When you type a number in a cell that does not have any number formatting on it, you start out with a general format. That means you have no specific format and you're displaying the number exactly as the number is typed. The general number format is okay if you have small numbers, but some values will require that you have additional formatting to make it easier to read and interpret, especially if you're dealing with a huge data. For example, you may want to add commas to separate the thousands for large numbers. You may want to include currency and identify the monetary unit. All change the number of digits to display different number of decimal values. As I said earlier, number formatting is a facade. So on my picture right here, we can see a really beautiful architectural design. But do we really know what is really inside this? We don't know, we cannot tell, but we only see a really beautiful picture of this building right here. So think of a facade in the number formatting as an outward appearance that is maintained to conceal a less pleasant or what the actual number really is. So what does number formatting do? Number formatting allows you to change the appearance of numbers, which is how the number is displayed. This can include the dates, times, and without changing the actual number that is in the cell. The number format does not affect the cell value that Excel uses to perform calculations, which means the formulas don't see the number formatting. Formulas will use the actual number that is in the cell to perform the calculations. The actual value in the cell is also displayed in the formula bar. And we will see that Excel provides different types of number formatting. In our example 1, which is up here, we have used the number formatting to display the numbers. But if you look at the formula bar, you can see that we have extraneous decimals on this number. But when you look at the number that is in the cell without looking at the formula bar, you only see we have the number but without the decimals. What we have done in this number, we have used number formatting. And you can see right here on my number formatting group, it shows that this is formatted as a number. So how you add the number formatting on these numbers, as you can see, we have the number for that. We have the number for these two, but these two have a comma separating the thousands. We have currency for these two, and we have accounting for these two. And I will show you how we do the number formatting, the different type of number formattings that we have done here. So for this one, all we did was decrease the decimals. So if I were to increase the decimals on these two numbers, I will come back here to the number formatting and I will use this button here to increase the decimals. So once I click on that, we can see that we are increasing the decimals. And as you increase the decimals, you can see now the number that is in the cell is matching the number that you see on the formula bar. And if I click on this cell as well, the number that is in this cell, which is the actual number, is matching with the number that is right here. So the other way that you can do this, if I were to undo what I just did, and I will use the keyboard shortcut to undo that, so Control Z. So the other way to remove the number formatting of these numbers that I have selected here is to come up here on the number group. And once you select General, which has no specific format, it removes any number formatting that may have been applied to the values in your cell. So if you would like to remove any number formatting on any of your cells, so you select the cell that you would like to remove the number formatting, and then you come to the number group here, click on that, and you select general. That way you will have removed all the number formattings. The other way to do that is to click on this dialog launcher, which opens the format cell dialog box. And you can see the format cell dialog box is right there. The other way to open the format cell dialog box, I will cancel that for now. So the other way to open the format cell dialog box is to use Control-1. And you can see it still opens the format cell dialog box. As you can see right here, this number is formatted as a number. You can see we have 2 decimals right there, and I used 1,000 separator for the commas. So that's why you see these 2 numbers have a comma. If I would like to remove the decimals, I can come up here, remove the decimals, or if I would like to put back to no specific format, I will select general, and then once I click OK, it has removed any number formatting on those cells. Now that we have seen how to remove the number formatting and to apply the general format or no specific format on the cells, what I would like us to do here, I will select all these and I will remove any number formatting that are on these cells, and then we'll come back and apply different number formattings on this cell, and I will show you how to do that. So I've selected all these cells, and I can either come up here and select general. So I'm in the number group, so home tab, number group, click up there and select general. That will remove any number formatting that we have right there. Or I can use the keyboard shortcut Control-1 to open the format cell dialog box, and we can select general right there, and we will remove any formats that have been applied on these cells that we have selected. So the other thing that we can do is use a keyboard shortcut. So the keyboard shortcut to remove any number formatting on your cells is Control-Shift-tilde. That removes any number formatting that you had on your cell. So as I said, you can either come up here on your number group, select general, or use your keyboard shortcut Control-1 to open the format cells dialog box and select general and click OK. Or you can use Control-Shift-tilde to remove any number formatting that you have on your cells. So now that we have removed this number formatting, so on these 2 number values, we will decrease the decimals. And you will see once we decrease the decimals, it won't change the actual number that is in these cells. Same thing once we apply the different number formattings that we shall apply on these other cells, it will not change the underneath number or the actual number that will be in that cell. So for these 2 cells, we come up here. So this one we used when we are increasing the decimals. We will use this one when you're decreasing the decimals. So we click on that, and you can decrease all the decimals, or you can decrease and leave only 2 decimals. So that way we have formatted those 2 numbers, but you can see the formula bar still shows the exact number that is underlined in that particular cell. So on this one, we want to apply a comma style. So we can either click right there, which will give us a comma style format with 1,000 separator right there, and it will give us 2 decimal places. And I'll do Control-Z, or we can use the dialog launcher here on one number group to open the format cells dialog box. But because we already know the keyboard shortcut, we will use the keyboard shortcut to open the format cell dialog box. So Control-1, and now we can click on the number, select that. How many decimals do you want? You are able to select the number of decimals that you want to show on that number. And now we can check that box for 1,000 separator for the commas. So if you would like your negative numbers to show with a negative or with a different font color or with parentheses or the brackets, you can choose the format that you would like from here. So we'll just leave it as a negative and we will click OK. And now we can see we have the comma for the 1,000 separators, and we specified we only need 2 decimal places. So for these 2 numbers, we would like to format that as currency. So this run right here, we can use that if we would like to format as accounting. And you can see from here also, you can also select the different type of format that you would like. You can select either whether it's a dollar, whether it's a pound, a euro, whichever currency that you would like to select. And you also have more accounting formats right there. So we'll not use that, but that's a different type of format that you can use as well. But we'll use our Control-1 keyboard shortcut to open the format cell dialog box, and we will format that as a currency. And you can see also when you're formatting as a currency, you have the option to change the number of decimals from there, whether you want 0 or more decimals, decrease, however many decimals that you want, you are able to select from there. So we'll leave it at 2 decimals. If you want to change the symbol for your monetary value, so you can use that arrow, and you can see we have different symbols that we can use. We will leave that as dollar symbol. And again, you can see we have different options of showing our negative numbers, and you can select whichever option that you desire to select. So we'll leave it at the first option, and I will select OK. And now you can see now these ones are formatted as a currency, and you can see right here is formatted as a currency. And for these two that we formatted as a number, you can see right here it shows it's formatted as a number. So right here, when I click on these two numbers that we formatted as a currency, you can see that the actual number is still underneath that cell. So all we are doing is formatting the way we want to show the number. So that's why I said the number formatting is a facade. We are changing the appearance of these numbers, but the actual number is still lying underneath the cell. So for these two cells, or for these two values, we'll format these as accounting. So again, Control-1, and we open our format cell dialog box, click on accounting, and you can see on the accounting, we don't have the option to show different formats of the negative value, but we also have an option here just to select what symbol we are using. We'll leave it as a dollar, but you have an option to select the different currencies that you would like to select from there, or the different symbols for that matter that I would like to select. And you can see we have several of them. So I will leave it as a dollar symbol. We'll keep it at 2 decimals. If you would like to decrease or increase, you can use these 2 arrows right there, and we'll click OK. And now you can see we formatted that as accounting. We formatted these as currency, these 2 as numbers, but with a comma separator for the thousands, and these 2 as numbers, but with no decimals on these 2. But as I said, and I have been saying in this video, that the number formatting is a facade. We are only changing the appearance of the number to show how we want the number to show. But we are not changing the actual number that is in the cell. We're only changing the outside appearance. But the actual number will always be in that cell. Now let's look at our second example, and I will click on NF2 worksheet. So as I said, by default, in Excel, the cells are in general format, or no specific format for that matter. And as you can see right here on our example number 2, we have a general format for all these numbers. So if we would like to format these in different types of formats, as I said, you select the cells that you would like to apply the formatting on. And then because we already learned our keyboard shortcut to open the format cell dialog box, which is Control-1. And now right here, we'll format that as currency. So you can choose the number of decimals, as I said, and you can choose how to show the negative numbers. If you're changing the symbol for your currency, you can do that using right there, as I said before. So we'll leave it at 2 decimal places. We'll leave it at the first option right there, and I will click OK. And you can see now that has formatted as a currency. We'll select these other ones, Control-1, and we'll format these as accounting, leave it at 2 decimals, and click OK. So as you can see, we have now the general format, we have the currency, and we have the accounting. But keep in mind, the number formatting is just a facade. We're not changing the underlying number in these cells. So as you can see, on the currency, you can see we have a floating dollar. Decimals are usually lined up and zeros will show as zeros right there. You do have an option to choose how to show the negative values, and we already saw that. And on the accounting, the dollar symbol is fixed to the left side. Our decimals are always lined up, and the zeros right here will show as dashes. So negative values will show in parentheses right there, and you do not have an option on how you want to show the negative values. I'll scroll down for example number 3. So another thing that you can do when you want to apply the number formatting to your data, you can decide to format the cells beforehand. That's before you enter the data. So for example, you want this one to be formatted as a currency. You select all those cells that you would like to format as currency, and then you format that as a currency. Choose how you want to show your negative numbers and how many decimals you want. And if you're changing the symbol, you can change it and then click OK. And then choose these other ones, and then we'll do Control 1, and we'll show these as accounting. And click OK. So right now, this will save you time when you're entering data because you already formatted that. And all you do is just type in the data and enter as you go. And you can see as I type, all my data is already formatted right there. As I enter, it's all formatted. It's all formatted. And the same thing, if I type this same data right there, and I'm just doing one decimal, I'm not doing both decimals, but because it's already formatted, I don't have to type the 2 decimals. It will automatically change that for me to 2 decimal places because that's what I chose when I was doing the formatting. The $148, I don't even have to type 0.00. I can just type 148, enter. It will format that for me, same as $10 and the $5. And that formats for me. So it saves you time when you're typing if you would like to do your formatting before you type your numbers. Now let's go to our 4th example, which is NF3 worksheet. So right here, we would like to do some calculations. And I would like to show you that the formulas don't see the number formatting that you have applied on the particular cells that you're doing the calculations on. So when you have that, it's difficult to know what number is underneath since the formula, or since on the formula bar, you cannot see the actual number that is in that cell. So for example, let's multiply these 2 values. So we'll do equals $51, which is A7 for the cell reference, multiplied by AB for the cell reference. And I'm just using my cursor to select that. And I'm going to press Control Enter, remain in the same cell. And because this is a relative cell reference, I can just copy my formula down. And you can see on this one, on the formula bar, what we see is our formula. And what we see here as well is our formula. So when you have a formula in the cell, it is difficult to know what number is underneath, since all you can see on our formula bar is the formula that is in that particular cell. So to know if these numbers are the real numbers that are in the cell, you can just remove any number formatting or increase the decimals to know what exactly is in these cells. So if we were to look on under these cells, so we look at that 2, it's 2 on the formula bar. See, these are the one, it's 2 on the formula bar. But we know 51 multiplied by 2 should be 102. So this one is correct. That's $51. It's $51 on the formula bar. This one right here is not 51. On the formula bar, we can see that's 50.5, which means this has been formatted. But as I said, our formula calculations do not see the number formatting, but they see the actual number that is in that particular cell. And so that you not be misleading on your calculations, the best thing to do is to either remove the number formatting, which we will remove the number formatting here, or we can increase the decimals. So if we were to remove the number formatting, we'll have that as general, no specific number formatting on that. Or let's do Control Z. We can increase the decimals right there. And now if I increase the decimals, I can see now whatever I see here is whatever the same value that I see on the formula bar. So now that we understand that the formulas don't see the formatting that we have applied on the cell, that leads us to the next thing that we were going to learn, and we are going to learn about the round function. So the round function is totally different from the formatting, and we will see that on our next example. So let's go to the round worksheet. Well, not all calculations require rounding. But you will have to decide when to use the rounding. The questions that will guide you to see whether you will require to do rounding, when you must do rounding. So you're required to round when you're dealing with money. So when you're multiplying or dividing, when you have extraneous decimals, which are past the penny position, and when you will use your formula result in a subsequent formula. Those are the three instances when you must use the round function. When you do not have to use the round function is when you're not doing any calculation and you're just looking at your number, then you can do or leave your number just by applying the number formatting. We have the rules for rounding function right here. So if you're rounding to the penny, which is the 100th position, you use 2 for the number of digits. If you're rounding to the dollar, which is ones position, then you use 0 for the number of digits. In most cases in this class, all the formulas that we shall be using and the calculations that we shall be learning in this class, in most cases we'll be rounding either to the penny, which is 2 digits, or we'll be rounding to the dollar, which is 0 digits. I have other examples here for your notes that you can refer to. If you're rounding to the hundreds, how many digits you will require to use. Some examples of when you will need to round the numbers, and also using round functions to round values. I have these notes for you, and you can always read these notes and look back to them even when we are doing the classwork. So now let's go to our first example, which is round 1 worksheet. So before we see several examples, let's first remind ourselves on how to round. So when you're rounding, you pick a position that you want to round to. So as I said, we round when you're dealing with money and when we have extraneous decimals, and also when you will use our formula result in a subsequent formula. So let's remind ourselves how to round using by hand. And again, we also use the round function to remove the unwanted decimals. So when you're rounding by hand, let's say we have 164.97351. So the first thing that we want to do is to pick a position that we want to round to. So we are rounding to 100th position. So if we are rounding to the 100th position, that means this is the number that we are rounding to. This is the position that we are picking, 7. That's the position that we are picking. So the next thing that we will need to do is look at the number that is to the right of that digit. So the number that is to the right of 7 is 3. So we look at 3 and then we decide whether we want to round based on the number, is it 5 or is it greater than 5? So if it's 5 or greater than 5, that means we will round the 7 to become 8. If it's less than 5, that means we will not round, but also we will remove or we will get rid of all the other decimals. So in our case, it's 3 right here. So it's not greater than 5, which means we are not adding anything to 7. That will be 7 plus 0. And then we are getting rid of these other decimals. And so the rounded number here will be 164.97. On the same number, but if we look at 7 right here, because this is the number that we want, or this is the position that we are picking to round to, which we are picking to the 100th position. So look at 7, and then the number to the right, that's 5. So 5, the rounding rule, is it 5 or is it greater than 5? That means this is 5, so that means we will round 7 to become 8. That's 5. As I said, this is 5 or greater than 5, which means we will add 1 to our 7 right there. So 7 plus 1, which gives us 8. So our number here will become 164.98, but then we will get rid of these other decimals. We don't need those. So we round that to 164.98, and we eliminate all the other decimals after that. So now when we are rounding using Excel, we use the formula round. So we get the number that we are rounding, and then we put a comma to separate the arguments, and then we specify the number of digits that we are rounding to. So for example, on this one right here, we have the weekly pay, we have the tax rate, and we have the gross pay. So the tax deduction is this amount multiplied by the tax rate, which is gross pay multiplied by the tax rate. And we have that amount that right there. And we have all the decimals included. So if we format it as I said, and I will first of all delete that, and we will do this together. So I'm going to delete that, and let's do this together. So we'll get equals the tax rate multiplied by the gross pay. And we get that amount there, and we have all the decimals included, and we can say it's general number formatting. We can see that right there. So that means no formatting has been applied to this one. So let's do the same thing. So equals the tax rate multiplied by the gross pay. And now this one has been formatted, and we can see up here, this has been formatted to currency, which means our decimals are still there. The extraneous decimals are still there, but we don't see them because we have formatted this number as a currency. And as I said, the number formatting is a facade. It does not change the underlying number that is in this cell or the actual number that is in this cell. It's just a formatting. So if we want to use the round function to remove those extra decimals, that's when the round formula comes in, and we'll do equals round. And we tab. I always like to tab to select the function. So I see the round is selected right there, or it's highlighted right there. So I will tab to select that. Now the number is whatever numbers that I am multiplying. So I'm multiplying the tax rate multiplied by the gross pay. That's my number. And then I'll put a comma to separate the argument. Do not forget to do that, because I've seen in many cases, many students forget to do the comma, and they just close that and they get an error. So if you just close this and I enter, I get an error that you have too few arguments in this function. So I'll click OK. And this is because, as I said, most students forget that that's the number. So that's the number. So what are you rounding it to? So you need to put a comma to separate that argument. So we need another argument. How many digits are we rounding to? If we are rounding to the penny, which is the 100th position, as I said, the number of digits that we are rounding to will be 2. If we are rounding to the dollar, which is ones, the number of digits that we'll be rounding to will be 0. So in our case, we are rounding to the penny or to the 100th position. So we'll put a 2 for the number of digits. And now we can close that and Control Enter. So now we can see we have the same amount here or the same number here. But if we were to increase the decimals, you will see that these two are different. So I will increase the decimals, going up here to my number group and using the increase decimal button. So increase the decimals, and you can see the one that is rounded, even if we increase the decimals, we're just getting zeros because we rounded to 2 digits. We don't have any other numbers after that. But we can see the one that is formatted, we still have all our decimal numbers included in that value. So, and that's why if you want to get rid of the unwanted decimals, or if you want to remove the unwanted decimals, then you use the round function. So now let's go to our second example, which is a round 2 worksheet, and we will do several examples from there. So click on round 2 worksheet if you're following me, and we'll do some examples from there as well. On this worksheet, we do have several examples that we will see. We have, I think, 4 or 5 examples that we will work on this worksheet. So our first example here, we have example 5, 6, and 7. So our first example right here, we will not use round. And then the second one here, the second calculation here, we will use the round. Remember previously in this class, we learned about absolute cell reference and relative cell reference. So on this one, we will use the absolute cell reference, and we will log the tax rate in our formula. So we'll get equals, I'm not using round on this one. So I'm getting the gross pay, and I am multiplying that by the tax rate. So if you remember from our second video lesson, we need to log this tax rate cell reference to make it an absolute cell reference. So I'll press F4 to lock that, so that when I copy my formula down, it will only refer to the tax rate. So Control Enter, and I will copy my formula down, and I will confirm that my formula is calculating correctly. I'll press F2 to put that in edit mode, and I can see I have the correct cell reference for the gross pay and the correct cell reference for the tax rate, and it is locked. So escape, and now I'll get the total, and the keyboard shortcut for getting the total is Alt equals, and it has the correct range selected. So I'll do Control Enter, and I have my sum total right there. So I will do the same thing here, but on this calculation, I will use the round function. So we'll do equals round, and now we will get our number. Our number again is what we are multiplying. So we'll get the gross pay, and I will multiply that by the tax rate. I have to remember that this is an absolute cell reference, so I need to lock it. F4 to lock that. So that's the number that I am multiplying. That's one argument. So I'll put a comma to separate the argument, and then include the number of digits that I'm rounding to. I'm rounding to the nearest penny, or I'm rounding to the penny, which is the 100th position. So I'll put 2, close that, Control Enter, and now I can copy this down, and I can add this. Alt equals, which is the keyboard shortcut for sum function, and I can see the correct range is selected. Control Enter, and I can see I have 2 different answers. Same calculation, same values, but 2 different answers. And we know it's because we have used the round function on this calculation. We haven't used the round function on this calculation. So let's type what we see here, the one that is not rounded here. So 179.07, 123.83, so now let's add this. Alt equals, and we can see we get this same value, that we have the same value right here. But then we didn't type these numbers, but we typed these numbers. So what is these numbers right here? So I want to increase the decimals here and increase that. And we can see we have extraneous decimals on this one. And that's why it's giving us this answer, because it's eliminating these other 2 decimals that we did not include. We only included 2 decimal places right there. So if we were to increase more, we will sure get more decimals, and you can see we're getting that. But if we were to increase on the one that is rounded, from our previous example, you know that we will not get any other decimals, but we only get zeros right there. So that's why we need to use the rounding function, and that will help us to remove any unwanted decimals that we don't need, instead of just using the formatting and thinking that your decimals are not there. Your decimals will be there if you're just using the number formatting and not rounding when you're doing your calculations. So I will show you a different way to calculate this. So on this example, it's just the same calculation that we did up here, but on this one, we're using the dynamic spill formula. So if you're using Excel 365 or Microsoft Office Excel 365, then you will have spill formulas. So with spill formulas, you can create one formula and the formula will spill down the columns without you having to copy your formula down. Formula will only be in one cell. So when you edit, you will only be editing in that cell that has the formula. And then you do not have to decide whether it's relative cell reference or absolute cell reference, because we will not lock the tax rate when you're using the dynamic spill formula. And then the thing that you always need to remember, to select all the cells that you need in the formula. So all the cells that you'll be selecting that you need in the formula, that's called an array. With Excel formulas that return a set of values, is also known as an array. When we select the array in our formula, which in our case the array will be the gross pay, and then we will multiply by the tax rate. So what the formula will do, the formula will spill our answers in these neighboring cells, and that process is called the spilling. Formulas that can return arrays of variable size are called dynamic array formulas. So let's do that and see. We'll do equals. We are selecting the array, which is our gross pay, and we have to remember that we have to select all the cells that we need for the formula. So we selected all the cells that we need in our formula, and then we are multiplying by the tax rate. So we don't have to worry about locking that or making it an absolute cell reference, because we are using a spill formula which will spill our answers in the neighboring cell. Now, the thing that you need to be sure is that when we're spilling the answers, we need to make sure that in these neighboring cells, we do not have any value, could be a number or text value in here, because if we do, we will get a spill error. And I will show you that in a minute. So I will enter, and you can see we spilled our answers in the neighboring cells. So if I click on this cell, and if you look at your formula bar, you can see that the formula right here is grayed out. But if I press F2, I don't have anything in that cell. So my formula is only on this first cell. And you can see the formula bar, this formula here is not grayed out. And if I press F2, I can see the formula is in that particular cell. If I were to edit my formula, I will only edit my formula in this cell, and then it will spill the answers into this other neighboring cell. So I'll press F2. So if I want to see the entire formula here, do that, and you can see all these other cells don't have any formulas in them. The only cell that has a formula is this first cell that has a formula. So now I want to show you, because you might run into this error, and I want to show you how you may run into this error. So if I have any value on these neighboring cells, you can see now I get a spill error. I'm getting a spill error because my formula cannot spill the answers into these neighboring cells, because they can see there's something else. There's a value here, which could be a number or a text, that is in this cell that is preventing my formula from spilling my answers there. So if I delete that, my formula spills the answers into the neighboring cells. So one thing that you need to make sure, if you're using the dynamic spill formulas, the cells or the neighboring cells that you will be spilling your answers to are empty. So now let's get the data for this. Alt equals, get that data. And then right here, we will use the round function. So we'll do equals round. We'll get the number, which is our array for that one. Remember, we are using a spill formula. So we are selecting the entire array. And then we multiply by the tax rate. We are not locking that, but you need to remember that we are rounding. So that's the number that we are rounding, or whatever we are multiplying is the number that we want to round. So we put a comma to separate the argument. We are rounding to the penny, so 2 digits. We close that and enter. And you can see now we have that formula in that first cell only, but we don't have the formulas in this cell, but we have the answers that have been spilled to these neighboring cells. So I'll get the total for that. And now we have the total. This is rounded. This is not rounded. We used a relative and absolute cell reference for this calculation. We have used a dynamic spill formula for this calculation. So for this class, you get to decide whether you want to use the relative and absolute cell reference when you're doing your calculations, or whether you want to use the spill formulas for your calculations. So for me, my preference, I love using the spill formulas because it has fewer steps and I don't have to worry about locking or using an absolute cell reference. And my formula is only in one cell. So if I have to come back and edit my formula, I will only be editing one of the formulas instead of all the formulas. And I don't have to copy my formula down. So for my preference, I like spill formula, but you get to decide which one you want to use for this class in the lessons that you will be learning. So let's go to our next example, example number 6. So we have an invoice here. We have the items that we're selling, and then we have the tax rate right here. So I made this invoice for my kids. They do make their DIY. They make earrings and bracelets and necklaces and keychains. They make it and then they are able to sell to their friends. So I made this for them, and I will use this as an example if you are to create your own invoice, or you're doing your small business and you're creating your own invoice. So we'll use the round function. And if you go back to our worksheet here that has the round instances and when to use the round function, you will see when you have to use the round function. So now that we have seen the difference between using the round function and not using the round function in our calculations, moving forward in our calculations for this class, when we are dealing with money, we are multiplying and dividing, or when we have extraneous decimals, which is past the penny position, or when we will use the formula result in a subsequent formulas, we will always use the round function. So for every assignment or for every work that you will be doing for this class, remember that and use the round function. So in our example here, this is an example of a simple invoice. So we'll use this, and if you have your own business or small business, you can use also this and create your invoice. So let's do the calculation here. We're using the round, so equals round. We get the price, and we multiply that by the units. So remember, that's the number. Always remember to put a comma. And we are rounding that to the penny. So 2 digits. Close that. Enter. And then I will copy this down. And we get the subtotal right there, which is already calculated. The formula was already there. And now we need to calculate the tax amount for this sale. We will use the subtotal multiplied by the tax rate. So we'll do equals round. We get the subtotal. And then we multiply that by the tax rate. And then we put a comma in 2 and close that. Enter. So now we have that invoice calculated, the total for each item, the subtotal for all the items, and we included the tax as well. And then the total, including the tax, is already calculated right there, and we're using the sum function to calculate that. So now let's go to the next example, and this is the same calculation, but on this one, we will use the spill formulas. So let's do that on this one. Equals round. We have to remember to use the round. And then we select the price. We're selecting all the cells that we're using in that formula. we multiply by the units, and then put a comma. So those are the number that we are multiplying. Put a comma, rounding to 2 digits or to the penny, and enter. We can see our answers spilled right there, but don't forget our formula is only on this first cell. So the subtotal right here is already calculated. I have the sum function right there. Press F2. You can see the sum function, and it's selecting that range. Escape. Now to get the tax, we'll do equals, round. We get the subtotal, and we multiply that by the tax rate. We have to remember to put a comma, rounding to 2, close that, and enter. And we can now get the total right there, which is already calculated. Again, we're using the sum function for that. You can see we are adding just the subtotal and the tax to get the total for the invoice. So now let's go to our last example right here on this worksheet. So example number 7. We will calculate the tax deduction rounded to the dollar. We'll do equals, we'll do round, and since we're not using the spill formula, we'll only select that one cell reference and multiply by the tax rate. We're using the relative cell reference and absolute cell reference, so we need to lock the tax rate, F4 to lock that and make it absolute cell reference. And then we have to remember, do not forget, don't close that. You have to remember to put a comma. And then now round to how many digits? We are rounding to the dollar, or we can round to the penny. So for our case here, let's round this to the dollar. So I'll put a 0 because I'm rounding that to the dollar. And then I can now close that. Control Enter. And now that is rounded to the dollar. And I will copy that down. And the other thing that I can do, if I don't want to drag this down, I can double click once I see the angry rabbit. Double click that, and that copies my formula down. And I can press F2, make sure that my cell references are correct. That's the correct cell reference for the relative cell reference. And this is the correct cell reference for the absolute cell reference. And I'm rounding to the dollar, which is 0 digits. So now on our last example on this worksheet, we will use the spill formula. So we use the round. We have to remember that we are rounding. So equals round. We are selecting all the cells that we are using in our formula. Don't forget that when you're using the spill formula. And then we are multiplying by the tax rate. So multiply by the tax rate. We're not locking because we're using a spill formula. So that's the number that we want to round. So we have to remember to put a comma. And we are rounding to the dollar. So if you're rounding to the dollar, that's 0 digits. So put a 0. And then I close that. And I press Enter. And my answer spills right there to the neighboring cells. So again, as I said, the formula is not in this cell, and you can see on the formula bar, it's grayed out. The formula is only on this first cell right there. That is it for this video. In this video, we learned about number formatting, and we have seen some different types of number formatting. And we have also learned that number formatting is a facade, but it doesn't change the actual number that is underlying in the cell. We have also learned about the rounding function, and we have seen how to use round in Excel. And we have also learned that we can use the dynamic spill formulas instead of using the relative and absolute cell references when we are doing our calculations. So again, as I said in this class, you're welcome to use either the relative and absolute cell references when you're doing your calculations, or you can use the spill formulas. It depends on your preference, whichever you like best and whichever you see that it's easier for you to use. Another thing that I need to remind you, when we are doing our calculations and you're dealing with money, you have to remember to use the round function. So the instances when you have to remember to use the round function is when you're dealing with money, you're multiplying and dividing. When you have extraneous decimals that are past the penny position, or when you use your formula result in a subsequent formula. So that is it for this video, and I will see you in our next lesson. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.